What is up? What is up, everybody? What is up, everybody? First of all, welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, the RB Laws. This is my co-host.
For Wells.
Today was crazy. It was all about playoffs, and the first thing we have to say is light that beam. because Sacramento, they took the W in the first game, but it was an action-packed day today. We had a bunch of games, basically all the first round games, and then we've got a few tomorrow. I think 4 tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so another quadruple header, which is crazy. I love the format. This is amazing. And this is that time of the year that, the NBA really starts to heat up and get all the traction because, during the regular season, some of the games aren't as competitive, but, we had some really competitive games today. And the first one was 76ers Nets. 76ers won 121 to 101. And I think that was kind of expected. 76ers were at home, Joel Embiid did his thing. 76ers, there are some doubts with them, but they have a lot going for them. And I think with this Nets team, I think there's just no expectations for them. So I think this is kind of a matchup where you can just hand the Sixers this one. I just don't see the Nets, stealing probably more than 1 or 2 games, But, back to the stats. Embiid had 26 points, a little bit underwhelming compared to what we're used to from him, but, nonetheless, a great job. Harden, 23 and 13, which was really good. He started off kind of slow, sluggish, looked a little lazy in the paint, got blocked a few times, but, he picked it up and really, showed that dual capability that he has where he's able to, finesse, finish, shoot, and also facilitate at the same time. So hats off to him. Then you have Tobias Harris, who put up some really big buckets, energetic ones to get the momentum going and, shifted in the direction of Philly. Because there were at times where the Nets, and Mikal Bridges specifically was kind of trying to, shift the momentum towards their way. But, Tobias Harris was there to counter and stop the bleeding a little bit. But I thought this was an interesting game. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, going into the series, I thought that Brooklyn didn't have a great shot at beating Philly just because, obviously the matchup wise with Joel Embiid, I think is a problem, right? In
Yeah.
terms of his size and, just the skill level. This game, he had 26 points, so not a super high scoring game, but, Brooklyn's game plan was to double team him and kind of force him to get rid of the ball. And, this game, every time he did, right, the Sixers were able to take advantage of that, right? The team as a whole, like a ton of assists,
Right.
24 or no, I think it was actually like 38 assists, excuse me, right? And of course, they hit a bajillion 3-pointers, 21 of 43 from three. It's really
Yeah.
hard to beat a team when they got it going from three like that. Brooklyn shot pretty well from three also, 13 of 29, right? But it was
Right.
just issues with turnovers, right? A lot of ill-advised passes, a lot of just poor passes. Right, there were multiple times, right, where one of those, where Dinwiddie or somebody else would try to kind of force a lob to Claxton, and it
Yeah.
just wasn't a good pass. It was usually too high. Um,
Right.
but Mikal Bridges was awesome, and that was kind of a storyline to look into, as there was a lot of talk about whether or not what we were seeing from him since the trade deadline was going to carry into the playoffs, and it definitely has, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see the skill level in terms of being able to knock down, the mid-range shot, threes, right? Being able to get to the line while still being a really good defender. Um, so pretty impressive, Miles. Or excuse me, not Miles. Mikal Bridges' game.
Yeah, not
Uh,
Miles, dude.
yeah, we'll get into him, I think, probably when we do our Sunday podcast. But
Yeah.
regardless, yeah, just you got an okay performance from some of the other guys, right? Cam Johnson at 18, right? Dinwiddie's so-so performance, but like I said, I just don't think this team is necessarily good enough to beat Philly. This was kind of one of the series where I thought that it was probably going to be a little bit of a dry series just because I think Philly is just so much better than Brooklyn. With Harden, you mentioned he had a pretty good game. It was kind of strange, right? 23 points, 8 of 21 from the field. Pretty much almost all of his shots were threes.
Yeah.
He had 8 made shots, 7 of those made shots were threes. He couldn't really do a lot around the basket. A lot of times
It
when
was
he was
so
driving to
weird.
the rim, like you mentioned, he was getting blocked, leaving a lot of shots short. And that's going to be kind of something I think to keep in mind as Philly probably goes into the second round against Boston, right? Just given the fact that you're going to need Harden to be, somebody other than just a guy that can knock down threes. He's got to
Yeah.
be able to get to the rim and facilitate, like you mentioned. So, that's something to look at, right? Because we know historically he's not really been the greatest playoff performer. He had a good game today, but I don't necessarily know if you want him, you know, only capable of making threes on offense, right? And
Yeah.
I think you'd like to see a little more from him, but I'm not going to really complain because he still had a really good game.
Yeah.
McDaniels was good, right? The bench for Philly was pretty good. I just think
Yeah.
Philly's better.
Oh
So,
yeah, for sure.
this, yeah,
It's not
like I
even
said,
close.
this was a series where I kind of expected Philly to probably run away with it. The final score, even though it was a 20-point game, there was a long stretch where it was pretty back and forth, but it
Yeah.
always felt like Philly was in control. Um, right? Brooklyn, even when they were shooting 60% from the field, was still behind, right? So, just in general, like a common ism for me is like, if you're playing about as good as you can and you either have a relatively small lead,
Yeah.
right, or you're behind, right, it's probably not likely that you're going to win that game. And that's what happens.
Yeah. It was a weird game, to be honest. And I think, like you said, the main factor that made it weird was Harden not being able to finish for me. I think that was just so weird and out of character. But to be fair, he's a little bit older, and he has had some injury history, so it's understandable that he's not able to get downhill and finishes
He looked
accurately.
Yeah, he looked better at different points earlier this season, but like
Yeah.
you said, once he came back from the injuries, it just felt like he hasn't looked as good as of late, and that's
Yeah.
something that would probably concern me as a Philly fan, but not for this series. You can get by this series
Yeah.
with Harden not necessarily at 100%, but you're going to need him to be, at 100% against Boston.
For sure. Um, and I guess moving on, we had Celtics Hawks, which was basically a lopsided victory for the Celtics, 112-99. And this one was, I don't know, this one was probably my least favorite game just because I think everyone knew for sure the bona fide outcome of this. I don't think anybody has the Hawks beating the Celtics at all, just because the Celtics are so much better. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's really not much to say except for the Celtics are just playing better. Tatum had 25, 11 rebounds, and then Jaylen Brown had 29 and 12 rebounds, which is really good. So, Derek White 24, and he's a key part of their rotation, and like he's like a wild card player. Like he can come in there, defend, but he can also drop some buckets and get you the points that you need off the bench. And Marcus Smart had 11. So that was kind of interesting. Robert Williams, 12, 12 and 8. And I don't know, like with the Hawks, I just don't see them. I just don't know how far like this roster can really get them. Trae Young played kind of mediocre, 16 points, 8 assists. DeJounte Murray had like what, 24, 8 rebounds and 6 assists. Like it's just not enough. And I just don't think the Hawks have enough firepower to combat the Celtics. I think the Celtics are just a more well-rounded team, and honestly, their only competition, in my opinion, is probably the Milwaukee Bucks. If you want me to be honest, roster-wise. But yeah, what did you think about this game? I thought it was really weird because like I said, it was lopsided from tip-off basically.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the Sixers Nets game, I kind of felt this was a series that was probably not going to go much further than, five-ish games.
Yeah,
Just because, again, like you mentioned, right, the Celtics are so much better than Atlanta. Um, I mean, Trae Young had a pretty poor game, I think. 16 points, 8 assists, which is fine, right? But
right.
5 turnovers, 5 for 18 from the field, right? That's not
Yeah,
necessarily great. Again, similar, DeJounte Murray, his numbers were fine, a little inefficient, right? 0 of 6 from three, but he's not a great 3-point shooter. Um, I mean, that's been the Atlanta's issue all season is the shooting isn't great. The defense isn't always great. They made it a semi game in the second half, right? They
hmm,
cut the lead down, right? The Celtics, I think, were up by as much as like 34 or something like that, right? And Atlanta got it pretty close, single digits. I think they might have gotten it to like 11.
yeah,
But I just never felt that. I just never felt like Boston was going to lose that lead, right? I mean, I think it's pretty natural to kind of take your foot off the gas when you have a 30-plus point lead. And their execution was pretty flawless for most of the game, right? The ball movement was on point. The defense was on point. So, I mean, like you said, in the East, right? I think Milwaukee is probably the only other team that can beat Boston.
yeah,
For me, like just the for Boston, it was good to see Robert Williams back out there. He came off the bench, and he's a real big key to their team, right? Because when he's out there, being able to alter shots, block shots, get rebounds, offensive rebounds, and
Yes.
catch lobs as a lob threat to help the Celtics with their vertical spacing, right? Because Horford
Yeah.
isn't a guy that you can just throw the ball up and catch lobs to. Um, they need him out there, right? And it's kind of like, with Milwaukee, if Chris Middleton isn't, back to what he can normally do, it's going to be really tough for Milwaukee to be able to win, even with as good as Giannis is, right? But it's similar to Boston, right? I mean, they need Robert Williams to beat himself in order for them to, achieve their ultimate goal of winning the title. Like I said, I don't think either of them are going to really struggle in the first round.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens tomorrow with the Heat Bucks series, but I mean, I think just in general, like Atlanta's just a mediocre team, and it's just going to be interesting because if they get swept or lose in five, to Boston, I do kind of wonder since there had been so many rumors about them, having about the front office having the green light to kind of do whatever they need to do,
Mm-hmm.
you know, including rumors about maybe moving on from Trey Young. I just kind of wonder what that's going to look like because I don't see any way that they beat Boston because I just think that Boston's just on another level in
Yeah.
comparison to Atlanta.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, I think with the future of the Hawks is up in the air completely. But, this is kind of expected though, because this is the first round. A lot of the lower seeds don't normally stand that big of a chance against the higher seeds anyway. So this really doesn't surprise me, and it shouldn't come to a surprise to anybody who actually watches the NBA. But I'm sure this series is going to go Boston's way, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Um, but in regards to Atlanta, like, what do you do? That's a great question. Like, do you really want to move on from Trey Young, or do you want to try and thug it out, or figure out a solution to the problem without moving on from somebody like that? I don't know. Like, that's an answer that only the Hawks can give us the answer to when it comes to that time. Like we're not there yet, I don't think, but I'm curious also what constitutes that. Is it going to be a first round elimination? Because I think that's a little bit unrealistic. Or is it going to be a sweep? I don't know. I feel like that's just something that we're going to have to keep our eye on. And I think it'll probably be one of the hottest stories of the summer.
I just like you said, I don't know what you do because I mean, with
Yeah.
Atlanta, I mean, if you're gonna move on from Trey Young, it has to be, I'm assuming the feeling would probably be somewhat mutual if that were to happen,
Yeah.
and it's just tough because you'd have to find a team, that would want Trey Young, but is also in a position that's probably better than Atlanta, right? Because I
Right.
mean, I don't think Trey Young would, if he wants out of Atlanta, because Chris Haynes mentioned in a report earlier this season that he could be the next star to ask out. Um, and so, like, if he wanted out of Atlanta, right, I can't imagine he would want out of Atlanta. And then if they were like, hey, we're going to send you to Orlando, or do you like that? Like, I can't imagine that. So it would have to be a team, that would need a point guard
Right.
that would still be in a good position. But there's not that many teams because most of the really good teams have good point guards that they're probably pretty comfortable with. I mean, you know, maybe like a team like Phoenix, right, with Chris Paul. But I mean, if you're Atlanta, why would you trade Trey Young for Chris Paul? You know,
Exactly.
um, yeah, or let's say I don't know a team like I don't even know. I mean, say like the Lakers, right? Like, but I mean, I
Okay.
feel like they're pretty happy with their roster. I don't think they would want to do anything with that. So I mean, I don't know where he would go. I mean, it
Yeah.
might just be a scenario where he might just either be stuck, or if I feel like if Atlanta moves him, they're just not going to get back a whole lot, for him. And I feel like he's a good enough player where you should feel pretty happy with whatever you get back. Because I
Right.
mean, like I don't know. It's a really tough situation to gauge. I feel like we're just gonna have to wait until the off season to see what
Yeah.
happens. But I do think the Hawks are going home. I just don't think they're good enough, and it's disappointing, right? Because they
Yeah.
started the season off well. Um, there was a lot of optimism following the Dejounte Murray trade, but they gave up a number of picks. I think it was 3 unprotected. Um, and so obviously they're in a situation where they're gonna have to be careful. Excuse me,
Bless you.
because thanks. Yeah, because if you miss the playoffs or B go out early, right? I mean, you're not going to see a lot of good returns for that trade, right? You don't make a
Yeah.
trade like that just to be the 7th seed and get bounced in the first round. You make a move like that because you're trying to ascend to the
You're
top
trying
of
to
the East.
yeah, you're trying to
So
contend instantly.
yeah, I just don't see how they do it because I mean, you have Boston, you have Milwaukee. Those two teams aren't going anywhere.
No.
Um,
Philly.
Cleveland is, yeah, Philly. Obviously, they're not going anywhere. Cleveland is really good and could get better, right? The
Yeah.
Knicks, I think, at this point are probably better than Atlanta.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I don't know where they can really go. I mean, that's already 4 or 5 teams that I would say are better, and it could be more next year depending on what happens. So
Yeah.
I think they might be kind of stuck, but
Yeah.
we'll have to see.
It's unfortunate, but like you said, it's a developing thing, and I'm sure we're gonna get some crazy and wild developments over the summer. Um, but yeah, moving on into the third game, I think this one was a really interesting one. Because we were both high, and I think we still are both high on Cleveland, but
Yeah,
it was Cleveland versus New York Knicks. New York Knicks 101 to Cleveland's 97, so New York Knicks won. And I've got a lot to say about this game because I was not impressed with Cleveland tonight. I was very impressed with Donovan Mitchell, but the rest of the team I was not very happy with. First of all, if they want to win this series, Darius Garland needs to get involved on offense, and they need to crack down on offensive boards. That's unacceptable. And I know the Knicks are one of the better offensive rebounding teams because just because of their pure size, and of course you've got Josh Hart, who's one of the best guard rebounders in the game, but it's just too many mistakes and the lack of instinct and drive that Cleveland had for me this game was really rough. Just to go through the stats, Donovan Mitchell had 38 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds, which is pretty much what we expect from him in the playoffs. He's had some pretty career games. You know, while being in Utah, so I'm not sure, what more he can do. So that's why I'm saying I think the rest of the team has to step up. You've got to have Jared Allen. He had 14 points, 14 rebounds. Jared Allen's not really a scorer, but I'd like to see him be a little bit more aggressive on defense. There were a couple possessions where Jalen Brunson would just get into the lane and then nobody's jumping to contest. I don't know. It's just so weird considering you've got Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. The Twin Towers basically, and nobody's really contesting. Like I said, I just didn't see any instinct or drive for this. So I don't know if Cleveland's underestimating the Knicks. I don't know what's going on, but they've got to fix this problem because I just don't see them getting anywhere if Darius Garland isn't touching the ball, especially in the second half. I don't think he attempted a shot in the second half. You can't have your point guard doing that, especially a guy at his level. So, I mean, what did you think about this game? Maybe you can talk about the Knicks. I don't know.
I mean, it was a pretty back and forth game. Early on, it felt like the Knicks were kind of establishing, their path to winning the game, right? Just being physical, right? Pressuring a lot of the players for Cleveland, right? In terms of forcing them into turnovers.
Yeah.
I mean, it got kind of rough at different points. Obviously, when you look at the Knicks, you had, a decent performance from Randall, right? 19 points, 10 rebounds, 5 turnovers, though, 7 of 20. But obviously, his first game back from injury. Brunson was great, especially down the stretch.
Yeah.
27 points, right? And a lot of it in the second half because he battled foul trouble in the first half. RJ Barrett, pretty rough game, right? From an efficiency standpoint.
Yes.
Not really a great outside shooter, anyways, right? His best strength is getting to the rim.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. The main difference this game for both of these teams was kind of the bench. Right. Josh Hart came off the bench for the Knicks. We both loved that move for
Yes.
New York. 17 points, 10 rebounds, hit a big three late after he turned his ankle. Just a big time shot, a
Mm-hmm.
much needed shot from the Knicks, right?
Yeah.
For the Knicks, excuse me. Who didn't shoot well at all from three this game anyway. They were 8 for 29 from three in a game they won by 4 points. Obi Toppin had some big minutes off the bench, right? 9 points, 4 rebounds.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Hartenstein, really effective minutes. Quickly didn't really shoot well, right? Not a great game from him.
Yeah. He went into the
still a
half like 0
possibility.
for 5.
Yeah, and 3 points all from the line, so didn't really hit a shot. But then you look at Cleveland's bench, right? Dean Wade, 2 points. Jetty Osman, decent game, right? But he had the unfortunate task of trying to guard Jalen Brunson late in the game, and it just
Yeah.
just
It
didn't
didn't
work.
work at all.
Yeah, but I don't know who else you really stick on him because I don't think you could have Garland or Mitchell guard him either.
No.
Ricky Rubio, right? Pretty much didn't really do anything. Right, Karis LeVert, right, again, another one of those games, where he really struggled offensively, right, 1 for 7. As I mentioned in the past, right, it's tough, to have a guy that's primarily an offensive player who just, isn't really consistent on offense.
Yeah, that can get to you.
Yeah,
Well, say
exactly,
you're
right.
say you're saying, dude.
Yeah, exactly. A scorer that, doesn't necessarily score.
Ding, ding,
So,
ding. There you go, man.
exactly. So, just overall, I don't really know what else you can do. I think you're just gonna have to hope that you can get a better performance out of your bench. Evan
Yeah,
Mobley, I thought defensively was pretty good, right? But offensively, he really struggled. He was 4 of 13, missed a
yeah.
lot of shots around the basket. Those have got to go in. Um, Donovan Mitchell, right? I mean, the only issue I had with him was I feel like he took way too many 3-point shots. I think like
Fair.
half. I mean, it felt like half of his shots were threes, and I'm looking at the box score right now, and it looks like, yeah, that was the case. 30 field goal attempts, 16 of those were threes.
Fair.
He's a good 3-point shooter, but I feel like that's way too many.
That's too high of a
Um,
volume. Especially like
but again,
sometimes like he was taking some bad sorry to cut you off, but
yeah, you're
he was taking some bad shots too where it's like I mean, I get that you can stop on a dime, but let's calm down and assess the floor a little bit more before you just
yeah.
jack the three. But continue, sorry.
At the same time, you look at the starting five for them, and I don't know where else the 3-point shooting is going to come from, right? Other than Garland, right? Because Okoro is not really is not that great of a 3-point shooter,
Yeah.
and then Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are complete non 3-point shooters. So he's pretty much he and Garland are pretty much the only two guys that can really do a whole lot from long distance, right?
Yeah.
For Garland, only 1 assist, which is pretty surprising given
Exactly.
the fact that I would say he's normally their best pure passer
Yes.
from a guard standpoint. Obviously, the ball was in Donovan Mitchell's hands for most of the game, so it's kind of difficult to for that to happen. But I don't know. It felt like there were times where Garland was fine, but then there were also times where it felt like he was kind of invisible. Um, just in general, I don't think it's necessarily like a big surprise that it's for several of these guys for Cleveland, it's their first playoff game.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily much of a shocker, right? That they, didn't all necessarily have great debuts. But again, it was a close game. I think that there are things that Cleveland can do, that can put them in a better position to win. I mean, I just, Mobley makes a couple of those flip shots, because they had a lead late in the game. It wasn't like,
Yes.
it wasn't like they never led. They had a brief lead where it felt like maybe they might pull away, right? Then Josh Hart hits that big three, and then the Knicks, end up pulling away in the end. So, just the old fashioned, back and forth physical game. It's just, I think there's adjustments to be made. And then, like I said, I think you're just gonna have to get a better performance from your bench. Just one more guy. If they had one more guy show up, I think they could have won this game. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. But even when you look at the Knicks, right? Maybe next game RJ Barrett plays better, right? That could make a huge difference. Maybe you have a game where Randall, instead of having a 20-point game, has like a 35-point game. So there's ways for the Knicks to also be better in game two. But if you're the Knicks, you got to be pretty happy, right? Cleveland's great at home; they're 31-10, um, right? And the Knicks, are pretty solid on the road.
Hmm.
So a road win shouldn't necessarily come as a surprise, but to get it in game one is still pretty impressive, especially
Yes.
when I feel like the Knicks are looked at as the underdogs in
Yeah,
this series.
especially in the series. Yeah.
Yeah, even though most people think it'll be, a long series, I feel like most people believe that Cleveland will win just because they have, the better higher end talent.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It was still a fun game one regardless. So
Yeah, it was really cool and close. That's what I enjoyed. I mean, like it almost came down to one final shot. But clearly that didn't happen. And for me, I think Julius Randle is probably their X factor. If you want me to be completely honest, because I know there were rumors that he wasn't even going to play in this game. So if you take out his impact, I mean, they probably would have lost this game. Considering he got a lot of offensive rebounds, hit some big threes, big shots too. But he also made some mistakes. Can't overlook those at
yeah,
all.
I mean that's pretty much the Julius Randle experience. I mean,
Pretty much.
part of how I felt about the series was based off of whether or not he was going to play. Like even
Exactly.
though I feel like Cleveland is going to win, I think it's a long series as long as Randall is healthy, right?
Yeah.
And he ended up playing in game one. Um, but if, like you said, had he not played, they definitely would have lost. And I
Yeah.
don't think they would. There's a path for New York to win the series if Randall isn't healthy. So
And
it's good to have him out there, right? Because you
yeah.
don't want guys missing playoff games, right? You want to see both, every team have all their talent available
Yeah.
out there.
And we can't forget with Cleveland, they're such a young team, brand new, lots of chemistry that still needs to be ironed out. I think, this was Garland's playoff debut. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and then this was also Donovan Mitchell's Cleveland playoff debut too. So you gotta, there's a couple factors here. So I think they're just gonna work out the kinks of this thing and figure it out and get it to be a well-oiled machine. I think that's what's going on. So hopefully we'll see more of Darius Garland alongside Donovan Mitchell. Maybe some of the other role players, step up into some scoring roles, because I think that's what's hurting this team is they just need to find some scoring elsewhere besides
And
Donovan
the
Mitchell.
offense has been a problem at times this season,
Yes.
even though they're, I think, a top 10 offensive team.
Yes.
They have had stretches offensively where they struggle. And, sometimes that can come from when you don't have a great bench. And, with the starting five, you don't have a ton of outside shooting. So
Yeah.
just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Very streaky sometimes.
Yeah.
But I guess to move on into our final game, which was the one that you and I watched together, actually.
Yep.
It was
What a
Golden.
game to end.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, what an ending! You couldn't ask for a better, first round matchup. But the game was Sacramento Kings versus Golden State. Sacramento won 126 to 123 against the Warriors at the Kings were at home, so you had to light the beam, of course. This game was wild. I didn't expect it to be this even at all. I thought, one team was gonna maybe pull away, but around what, the third quarter, I think I said, yeah, I think we might be lighting the beam tonight. But to start with the winners, you have De'Aaron Fox, who literally is showing why he was selected to be an All-Star this year. 38 points, 5 assists, 1 rebound. But I mean, just what a performance from him. He was doing some characteristic things that we're used to and some uncharacteristic things, shooting threes at a decent volume, which is interesting. That could be a, big time matchup difference that we could be seeing, a guy who can get really downhill quickly, facilitate and shoot. I think that's kind of what the Kings have been missing, but that could really get them over the hump if he can continue to be consistent like that. And then of course you have Malik Monk, basically is Robin to Batman. He had 32 points, which is insane. And he it seemed like he was just getting them from all different levels, from the three, from the mid range, from the paint.
Only four 3-point attempts,
Yeah.
and he made 2 of those threes. So
Exactly. So he was getting them from all over the place. But very solid game from those two. I think they are a little bit I guess underrated is the word. Maybe underappreciated. I don't know. Overlooked, I guess. Because they had a really solid showing.
I mean,
Then,
Fox is probably going to be all NBA third team though.
yeah,
So, or
I think so. Probably.
if not third team, he's going to be one of the top, guards on the all NBA team. So I feel like now he's probably not going to be underrated.
Yeah, for sure. Especially considering their record too.
Yeah.
And then you have Harrison Barnes, who had some shining moments against his former team. He had 13 points, 2 assists, 7 rebounds, hit a 3 that was really out of character, if you ask me. I was like, what the heck? And I'm pretty sure you were like, what are you shooting that for? Oh wait, you made it.
It just looked like a difficult 3.
Yeah,
He's a
for
good
sure.
three-point shooter.
Yeah. And then Sabonis, he had 12 points, 16 rebounds. That was kind of interesting. A little bit underwhelming for me personally, but I would have expected more. And it's funny, if he played better, they would have won by a lot more, which is also interesting. Then you have Trey Lyles, 16 points. Very interesting. That's the kind of buckets that you need. Those are the kind of guys that are valuable in the playoffs, because they can come in, give some guys a break and then just, bang, you just drop points. Okay, you're saying I don't know hoops, buddy? I definitely know more hoops than you, boss. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, yeah, this is very interesting though, because honestly, I don't want to air. Well, I mean, you've already said it on the podcast before. The Warriors are your pick to come out of the West, so I'll let you handle the Warriors, because this is not looking good for Warriors fans. I know, it's only one game, but you should be scared, because the Kings are showing you their potential and what they're capable of.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because you got, a great game from Steph. Obviously, you had, issues with turnovers, right? But,
Yes.
30 points, 11 of 20 from the field, 6 of 14 from 3. I thought defensively, even though it was a really high scoring game, I think the game plan, at least for Sabonis, was really good.
Hmm.
Um, right. I think Kevon Looney and Draymond did a really good job of limiting, his impact. But the uh, one concern is that they haven't been able to stop these guards pretty much most of the season, right? I mean,
Right.
and even though they got some good defenders at that guard spot with Gary Payton and DiVincenzo, right? But I mean, you look at De'Aaron Fox. I mean, he lit him up. I mean, part of the reason why Jordan Poole didn't play late was because they needed somebody to guard him, and it just he basically did whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Obviously, another big story was the fact that Wiggins returned, right? Pretty solid in his debut, 17 points, 3 rebounds, 4 blocks. Right. He really made a difference in terms of the offensive rebounding, the defense, kind of like I had been sort of hinting at before he was coming back. Obviously missed the big three late at the end of the game. That was
Yeah.
rough considering he was wide open, 1 of 8 from three. But I don't think you can really harp on him too much, right? This is his first game in like 2 months.
Right.
Um, Rough game for Clay. Hit some shots late, but 8 for 19, a 5 of 14 from three, plus minus of -14 in a game that the Warriors only lost by 3. Um, right, but I mean, Steph and Clay still they made 11 combined threes, and they still lost in it. In a game where De'Aaron Fox had 38 points and was 4 of 8 from three, and basically shot better than them from three. So I don't know. I mean, it's one game. It was a game that Golden State could have won, but again, the concern has been Golden State has not been very good on the road, and in order to win this series, they have to win, at least one game at home
Yeah.
because they don't have home court advantage, right? And obviously they didn't pass the test for game one, so they're gonna have to bounce back in game two because if they don't win game two, obviously we've seen in the past, right? Teams be down 2-0 and win 4 straight, but I just think the path becomes much more difficult. But at the very least, if you're the optimism can come from the fact that Wiggins still looked pretty solid in his debut. And eventually he'll be starting. He played 28 minutes, but eventually he'll be in the starting lineup and play more. So, I'm not too worried about them just yet. But
Okay.
obviously, the defense is still a major concern. And again, was the best offensive team in the league this season. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's even though most people, myself included, picked the Warriors to win, like I don't think you can take this Kings team lightly because any given night they can explode for a game, like
Yeah.
this. And again, Sabonis wasn't great. Maybe he has a better game in game two. Um, but again, the path for the Kings to win is there. It's just again, you have to bank on De'Aaron Fox,
And it is
being
only one game,
yeah,
so
either yeah, you have to bank on De'Aaron Fox being the best player on the floor, which I don't know is going to happen 4 out of 7 times. In a game where Stephen Curry's out there.
right.
Malik Monk, 32 points off the bench. But again, I don't know if Golden State can't figure out how to get stops, then they're not going to win
Yeah.
because
They
that's
they
kind of
need
the
a
big thing,
defensive game
right?
plan.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta be able to get stops, right? Because again, and it wasn't like the Kings defense was great either. I guess it was better down the stretch than Golden State's, right? But I mean, both teams still scored 120 plus,
Yeah.
uh, on pretty solid efficiency. But also Golden State took 53s and only made 32%, right? I
Yeah.
feel like there's gonna be a game, where they shoot better, but I don't know. Again, it's tough to gauge from one game because I don't think you can necessarily judge how a series will go based off of game one. Because historically, we've oftentimes seen, a team that loses a series win game one, right? That happened last year in the finals, right? Boston won game one, but still lost the series.
Right.
So I'm not worried yet about my pick.
Okay.
But obviously, it's not great, right? When you talk about the defense, that's got to improve. I think it can improve, but
Yeah.
the key here, I think, is Wiggins, right? Because again, he was really good, and if you can continue to get these type of performances out of him, I think it'll go a long way in them being able to come out the West.
For sure. One of our viewers said I called Kings. I feel like that's cap. I don't know what you're talking about because I don't know anyone who really picked the Kings, except for maybe one guy, but it definitely wasn't you. Anyways, kind of moving on to, well, I guess we should stay with the Kings and Warriors. There's a decent amount to talk about because with the Warriors, I mean, like I feel like if you have Steph Curry, if you just have this Warriors roster, I just don't think there's an excuse to lose to the Kings, if I'm being honest. And that's no disrespect to the
Pretty
Kings.
bad.
Yeah, and that's no disrespect to the Kings, but if you just look at the players and the caliber that they're on the Warriors roster, then you kind of move on to the Kings. It's kind of like, well, you would expect the more experienced, seasoned, and decorated team to, be able to, win this series. But, like I said, it is one game, and, sometimes teams do steal games. But it's just funny that the higher seed is practically the underdog in this situation, And I think that's just because of what the Warriors have been through, and who they have on this roster. But like I said,
Yeah.
if they lose to this team in a 7-game series, honestly, that's kind of embarrassing to me. And I would consider, doing something, changing something, because that can't stand for me.
Yeah, I do wonder. And again, I don't. I'm not there yet, but I do wonder if the Warriors do lose in the first round to the Kings, is there a potential to maybe
Bless you.
shake some stuff up? Thank you.
Hmm.
Maybe shake some stuff up because I do think you're right. That would be pretty disappointing. To have the season that you had, which was pretty rough, right? Be kind of fortunate that you get a first round matchup against, in my opinion, what I think is the weakest of the top three seeds,
Exactly.
and then you still lose. If that happens, I do think that there's potential for them to maybe shake up the roster. I don't know necessarily what it would entail,
Yeah.
but I think if there's a scenario where like another star asks out, right, that may be, you know, the Warriors could be another team that I think may be a potential option because they have, guys they could trade, right? Like even though I think he's a really good player, I don't think Jordan Poole, for example, is, I don't think he's untouchable, right?
Oh,
I think
yeah. No,
if
he's
there's a
movable.
scenario, yeah, if there's a scenario where they can get another star player and they have to give him up, right?
They'll
I
do
think
that.
they would do it. Yeah,
As
because
long
I
as
think
Curry's on that roster, they're gonna, look to improve
yeah,
it.
because I think you have yeah, because I think you have to maximize what you can as long as Steph is still a superstar,
Yes.
one of the top players. I think you have to try to build a championship roster every
Yes.
year.
Yeah.
And again, with their GM, he's up for a new contract, right? So does he decide maybe to leave and go somewhere
Good
else or
point.
call it quits? I don't know,
And we talked
right?
about that
So
really early on. I remember that.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten
um,
about that though.
yeah, exactly. But again, I think you still have to give the experienced team the benefit of the doubt over the course of the season.
Yeah.
When this core has been healthy, they've never lost a playoff series in the Western Conference.
Exactly.
Um, and I just feel like of all the teams they would lose to, I would have a really hard time believing they could lose to this team. I mean, again, I
Yeah.
think it's possible, and I'm not trying to, belittle the Kings because I think they've been really good this season. They've been a great story, but I don't know about this one. If you're Golden State, I think you'd have to be pretty disappointed given what could have happened depending on how the seeding could have gone. The last week of the season, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
world where they're the 5 seed and they're playing the Suns in the first round, right? Or there's a world where they're the 7 seed and they have to be in the play-in, right, with a potential to get knocked out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's really tough. But again, the Kings are a very difficult team to stop because they've been so great offensively and
Right.
if they can't get stops, I mean, it's going to be a long series.
Yeah. I agree with all those. Those are all valid points. Um, I guess to move on a little bit, looking ahead to tomorrow, we've got some more round one matchups. I guess we'll go with the first one, and that's Lakers Grizzlies. I feel like this is probably one of the more anticipated ones outside of probably Clippers Suns, just because it's LeBron James. And then of course you got the Memphis Grizzlies with Ja Morant. I don't really want to get into predictions, but because it is one game, and yeah, I don't really want to get there, but
Right.
I really think the Lakers are probably gonna lose this matchup. In general, I think the Lakers probably lose this series. Um, and with the Grizzlies, I'm not high on them, and you guys know that. You specifically know that as well. I'm not a Memphis fan. I feel like they still got a lot of work to do. And I don't want to basically poop on them for too long, but with the Grizzlies, the only thing that I fear is Jaren Jackson Jr. foul trouble. That's the only thing that makes me uneasy. But if he can just stay on his feet and learn to play without fouling and game plan for Anthony Davis, I think they'll be fine. Because I feel like potentially Dylan Brooks can really get in their head, and that pains me to say, but Dylan Brooks can potentially get in some of the Lakers players' heads, I think, and swallow up some headspace. But depending on I think how the first few games go, that we'll probably get some better insight. But just from a outside standpoint right now, I have to take the Grizzlies because the Lakers thus far haven't really impressed me too much. I mean, yes, since the trade deadline, they've been stellar and they've been playing much better. But at the same time, it's just not the team that I was expecting this year. Um, I thought they would be a lot better, but it is what it is. So, you as a Laker fan, do you think you're going to get bounced in this round, or do you foresee, getting past the Grizzlies pretty easily?
Hard to say. I mean, I think that this series realistically could go either way.
Okay,
I think a lot of it just kind of depends on, game plan execution.
right.
Obviously for the Lakers, their path to winning is you got to have a great performance out of AD.
Yes.
Right? Considering that Memphis is down two of its biggest guys, or not biggest guys, right? But you're down two of your bigs in Steven Adams and Brandon Clark. Those are guys that I think would match up pretty well against the Lakers if they were healthy,
Mm-hmm.
more so than other teams.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then obviously you have the Dylan Brooks X factor, right? Because I think that's a guy that they're probably gonna back off of and kind of dare him to kind of take a lot of the shots offensively, and in order to get it out of Ja's hands.
Yes.
Because I don't think they really have much of an answer for him.
It's just going to be
I-
doubling him probably, and like you said, leaving Dylan Brooks wide open.
yeah, I mean, I guess and then the other key is obviously can you stop the transition, right? Because if you turn the ball over, or take really quick shots and they're missing, and Memphis gets out and runs, right? That's how they're going to get that transition offense, and that's how they're going to blow you out of the gym. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to I'm looking primarily not even just at AD. I'm looking at a lot of the guards for the Lakers. Especially D'Angelo Russell. I think he's one of the biggest X factors in this series,
Oh,
right?
for
Because he's
sure.
a guy. I've never really been a huge fan of his. He's played well for the Lakers since he's gotten here since the trade deadline, aside from the playing game. But he's a guy that in the playoffs in the past has not necessarily been great. Right? You hope if you're the Lakers, right, that with a different type of role where he's not looked at as like a number one or two option, right? You'd expect him, you would hope that he would be better. Um, because when he's out there and he's playing well, that's usually when the Lakers are at their best, right? Because then that's where you get the shooting, combined with the defense, combined with the play in transition. So I think a lot of that is just going to depend on what you're getting out of him, what you're getting out of Austin Reeves, and then maybe one or two other guys off the bench. So I think that they can win the series, but I also think Memphis is still a very good team, and kind of how kind of like what you alluded to earlier, where it's very difficult for a low seed to upset, a high seed just in
Yeah.
general. The Lakers are, I think, better than your typical 7th seed, right? I
Yeah,
think
for
this is
sure.
closer to like a 2-3 type of matchup than a 2-7
Okay.
matchup. But also, then you also have to factor in Memphis is great at home. I believe they have the best home record in the NBA.
Yeah.
The only issue is they're terrible on the road. I think they're almost as bad as Golden State.
Right.
So, but again, Memphis has home court, so they could win the series and not lose, and not win any games in LA. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Like you said, I feel like I have to kind of watch the first few games to kind of get a sense. I would probably lean towards Memphis,
Okay.
but only really a lean. I don't think that they're like a huge favorite over LA, because I think there is a world where the Lakers can upset Memphis.
Yeah. I agree. But for me, I'm just going off of the seedings, to be honest, and what I've seen from both teams during the regular season. Like I said, I'm not really high on either team. I do like the Lakers a little bit more than the Grizzlies, but at the same time, me liking a team isn't going to factor in, if I'm going to pick them or not. I'm kind of just going off of what I've seen from them, and from the Lakers, it's been inconsistency, and I think them struggling against Minnesota. I know that's the play-in, and that is a different realm than the first round, but also their struggles in the play-in just didn't make me feel confident in them at all. So that's also a factor for why I chose Memphis. Moving on to the next game, it would be tomorrow. Also, we've got Bucks Heat. That's going to be an interesting one because,
Yeah, Bucks.
huh?
I got Bucks.
Yeah, I think everybody's got Bucks. The Heat have been pretty underwhelming, disappointing, all those synonyms.
For the series, though, not the game.
Yeah, not the game, but series wise, I think Bucks are clearing. I think Bucks are spoiler alert, Bucks are my pick to go to the to get out of the East. I think that's a lot of people's because I think they're just miles ahead of every other team except for maybe the Celtics. I think the Celtics are probably on that same level now. But yeah, with the Heat and Bucks, I just don't see the Heat going, winning more than 1 or 2 games, to be honest. They might not even win one. That's how good this Bucks team is. What are your thoughts? Probably the same, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I just, and again, I don't like you said, I don't want to use the play-in as evidence, because I think with the Heat, you have a whole season's worth of evidence
Yeah, very
that
true.
probably suggests that it's probably not a great team.
Yeah, they've
Um,
had their fair
they're
share of woes, and they've been
they're
really
awful.
underwhelming.
They're pretty bad on the road.
Yeah,
Um, they're 17-24, and obviously they don't have home court advantage,
right.
right? They got Jimmy Butler, and obviously he's really good, but again, he's only one guy. You need a little bit more. Bam has been, I think, pretty underwhelming in these
Yeah,
play-in games so
fair,
far, at least offensively.
fair.
Um, so I think you're going to need a better performance from him, but it also just feels like they need more help, on the interior outside of just Bam. It can't just be him, kind of trying to cover for a lot of people because,
Right.
when you look at some of the lineups where they have like 3, 4, relatively small players and then him at the 5,
It's
it
not a
just it
good
makes it
look.
really tough. And against a team like Milwaukee that has so much size, and is so physical, I just think that's a really tough matchup. So I would be pretty shocked if Miami extends the series. I guess the key kind of here is Chris Middleton. Can he kind of use this as a series to kind of get himself right? Because
Right.
um, earlier in the season the Bucks were pretty consistently not just my pick to come out of the East, but to also win the title. But part of it also kind of hinges on Chris Middleton because if he's not himself, it's going to be a lot harder for Milwaukee to win the chip.
Yeah,
And
I get
even
that.
winning against Boston, I think it's going to be really difficult. So, that's kind of what I'm looking at more so than this matchup between the two teams itself. Because I think regardless of whether or not Middleton's available, I think Milwaukee will beat Miami. But
Yeah, I
if
think
Middleton
Milwaukee
can,
clears.
yeah, but if Middleton can use this as an opportunity to get himself back to normal, then I think that's probably the best value that this series could give. Because if he can get, if he can just be close to what he was, then I think they're the favorites to win it all.
Yeah, great points. Moving on to the next game. This one is kind of. I feel like this one isn't as talked about as much as some of the other matchups that we've discussed. But it's Clippers Suns. Um, and I guess that's because what Paul George isn't back, right?
Yeah, he's not coming back. I think they said until maybe the semis, so that pretty much means he's out the first round.
Okay, yeah. So we've got Clippers Suns. And for me, I'm and like I said, these are the series predictions just for anybody who's joining, or if you guys are watching this back on our VOD. These are the series predictions, not the game predictions. But I've got Suns in this series. I think this is going to be. I think Kevin Durant's going to put the world on notice and remind the world, who he is and what he is. You know the meme. I'm Kevin
Right.
Durant. You know me. Like, it's going to be one of those moments where it's like, he lets the world know that he's still one of those guys, and there's a reason why, you know, he got traded for what he did. And it's going to be interesting to see, what this Suns team is going to be able to do against, a more defensive geared Clippers team. I think that's what I'm looking forward to. It's going to be defense versus offense pretty much. So what are your thoughts on this one? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I do think that Phoenix will win the series,
Okay.
especially considering Paul George is out. I do think that I think the Clippers can still compete against this team.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be like a walk in the park, just given the fact that Kawhi Leonard's on the other side, and he's obviously a terrific player as well. But I just think without Paul George, it's going to be really difficult for them to defend as well.
Okay.
Their defense has been pretty up and down this season. It really hasn't been as good as you would think. Just given the personnel, you would think that they're one of the top defensive teams in the league, but they really haven't been
Right.
for the most part. So I just think the key here is if Paul George is going to be out, that means that they're probably going to need a pretty good performance from some of those other bench guys, right? Like we're looking at, say, Norman Powell, um, right? Russell Westbrook, I think, needs to have a pretty big series. They have other guards in case he does, in case he struggles, but assuming he's the starting point guard, which I believe he will be, he's going to need to have a big series, or at least be effective in the minutes he's out there, right? Eric Gordon, right? Just if that's kind of what you have to do when you're down a star is if you're shorthanded, you need other guys to step up, that you
Yes.
may not normally expect big performances from. Like I said, and I think the Clippers are well equipped to do that because of their depth, but I still think Phoenix is going to win the series. Just because, again, without Paul George, it's going to be harder, right? Because you don't really have anybody that can guard Devin Booker. This is a series, I think, where Devin Booker should probably be, you know, not the best guy on the floor, but I think in terms of, like, say, the points spread, the point total, he'll probably be the highest scorer just because I don't think that there's, anybody that, on the Clippers in terms of their guards that can guard Devin Booker, especially without Paul George. Because you're going to need probably the wings to guard, to stick with Kevin Durant.
Yeah, very
Um,
fair. Yeah, I get
and I
that.
don't think, yeah, and I don't think those guys can guard Durant either, right? But, um, I definitely don't. I don't look at the Clippers guards as being elite defenders, right?
No.
Westbrook's not an elite defender. Gordon's not an elite defender at this point. Well, he never was, right? But
Yeah.
at
He
certain
was
points
all
he was
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Powell's okay on defense, right? But again, he's relatively small. Um, so I think that Phoenix will win this series. I
Hmm.
just think it's if Paul George was able to come back, and like I said, I think the report was that he's not coming back until he's close to 100%.
Yeah,
So I think the implication was probably he may not be back in the first round.
exactly.
So if he does come back in the first round, the Clippers have a chance. But regardless, I'm going to pick Phoenix because I don't think he will be back, and if he does, I think it will probably be a little too late.
Yeah, that's fair, and that's one of the reasons that I also picked the Suns as well because they don't have Paul George, and that's a huge disadvantage on offense and defense, and that's probably going to hurt them in the long run.
And I just checked.
Yeah, what's
So the
up?
Clippers, in terms of their defense,
Hmm.
are essentially, I believe it says 18th in
Okay,
defensive rating.
okay,
So that's below average.
yeah, then that's kind of
And again,
mid.
defensive rating isn't the end all be all. There's a lot of other statistics that go into
It's
there.
still a
But
telltale sign though. Yeah. So to move on, I'm warning you guys, it's about to get very hot in here because I've got a hot take.
okay,
So moving on to the next game, we've got Nuggets Timberwolves, and you know, unfortunately, I'm in a dichotomy, a living dichotomy here, because Jokic is my MVP,
yep.
but the Timberwolves are my dark horse. So here's the thing. I'm thinking the Timberwolves may take this to 7 games and win it in 7.
You think they can win in 7?
They could. And the
Wow.
reason why is because I think, I'm not going to say Gobert is going to be able to stop Jokic, but I think he's going to be able to somewhat not negate him either, but, put the brakes on him just for a little bit, just enough. I don't think he's going to be enough. He's going to do enough on offense, but, having Gobert back, I mean, I think this team, it's not, crazy or anything, but it is better than what we saw in the first playing game. I think Ant Edwards is finding his confidence, he's going to get the hot hand, hopefully, and then Towns, just imagine if Ant Edwards, Towns, and, the rest of the guys who can score get hot. I think Denver could genuinely be in trouble, because you've also got Gobert holding things down in the paint. So, I mean, it's hot, but at the same time, it is my dark horse, so I have to pick them to win this series, if you want me to be honest. I know you're going Nuggets, but, you might as well explain why. I know why, but go ahead.
I feel like the Nuggets are still going to win the series. I mean, I just think, even just with the MVP argument in mind, I still feel like Denver's a better team. I will say this, I think that there is a potential for this to be a long series because I do think Minnesota just is such a strange team, with those two bigs. I think they can make it tough. I don't necessarily know if Gobert is going to be able to stop Jokic, but just in regards to being able to get offensive rebounds,
Yep.
you know, and obviously just controlling the paint, defensively. The X factor here is kind of Towns and Edwards again,
Mm-hmm.
because those are your two best players, for the most part. And Towns, right, was pretty good in the first half, against the Lakers in the play-in, but he was pretty bad in the second half, especially in terms of the foul trouble.
Hmm.
It's been an issue pretty much his whole career. Is not being able to stay out of foul trouble. Edwards was awful against the Lakers for the entire game, and then against Oklahoma City, he was pretty solid. A
Yeah.
much better performance. So that's kind of the key there. Is I think those two guys. If those two guys can be the second and third best players on the floor, right? And then you get some, like a good game, good performances from Gobert,
Yeah.
right? And then Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson, they have a chance, but I would be pretty shocked if Minnesota won this series. I still
Okay.
feel like Denver's better, um, even with the size disadvantage, right? Because Aaron Gordon's gonna have to battle against one of Towns or Gobert.
Yep.
He's probably gonna be the one that guards Towns, if I had to guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, it's a weird matchup. It's a tough matchup, but I still feel like Denver is going to win. Again, you still have to factor in home court, and Denver's one of the best teams at home in the league. Um, so they're 34-7, I think. So I would be really shocked if they lost because I still feel like they're better. I get that this Minnesota team has been decent, okay, in the last month or so, but I don't feel like that they're good enough to beat them. I just don't. I mean, maybe it happens, but I don't see that one.
I can see it, and I'm gonna explain a little bit further. I think Jamal Murray might poop out. I think he might completely just disappear. He's got some question marks, and not to bash the guy or you know get on him about stuff, but I just don't know. I'm not as sold as I was a few years ago with him. In the bubble, I mean, he was magical. If you want me to be honest, I thought he was going to be one of the next guys up. But, he hasn't really improved much from then, and there's been guys that have kind of surpassed him who are younger, so what'd you say?
It's been the injuries.
Yeah, I know. So, it is the unfortunate injury history thing, but, he's just not the guy that I thought he was going to be. And I think that he's going to, prove me right. I think he's not going to be as impactful as people think. And then you also have Michael Porter Jr., who's also in a weird spot too, because, he's good, but he could be so much better. His ceiling is so high, but he's not there yet.
Yeah, he's inconsistent. I think I
Yeah,
do kind of. Will say I do agree. Like the pathway potentially for Denver to lose is if the other guys don't necessarily show up.
exactly.
Again, you know, during the second half of the year, Denver hasn't been as good, and they've had a lot of strange losses. Even when they have their guys, and I do think that there is a chance for that to happen. Right, Jamal Murray sometimes gets targeted on defense. Right,
Mm-hmm.
his offense has been up and down. Michael Porter Jr. not the greatest defender despite his length and athleticism.
Yep.
And just there's going to be nights where he's going to take a lot of shots, and there's going to be games where he makes a lot of them. But there also may be games where it's not falling, and you're like, and do I really want him taking that many shots? Maybe I'd prefer somebody else like Jokic taking those. So I guess it comes down to whose supporting cast do you believe in more.
Yes.
If you really believe in Denver's supporting cast, right, then
I don't.
yeah, then I feel like that's kind of the easy pick. But if you don't believe in their supporting cast and you believe in Minnesota's, right, then you go with them. I just don't know because Minnesota still at times just makes boneheaded plays,
Yeah.
and I
Oh, I
understand that
know.
yeah,
I
and I
get you.
understand that they swapped out D'Lo with Mike Conley, but it still happens sometimes, and you just never know.
And I think Mike Conley's a better defender than D'Lo, so that could potentially help. Negate the Jamal Murray factor even more. You know what I mean? But it. And I know it's hot saying that Minnesota's gonna beat the Nuggets. Especially since they're the 8th seed and the Nuggets are the first. But like I said, this is my dark horse, and I genuinely believe that this team can go far. It's just the stars have to line up for this to happen. But I think it's going to. Um, and like you said, it all comes down to the supporting cast. I think Jokic's supporting cast could potentially be a little bit more inconsistent. But like you said, Minnesota is an 8th seed for a reason. So,
Yeah,
but to be fair, Towns was out for a while, but, they
yeah,
did try and, I think they would have been higher if Towns was playing, if you want me to be honest. But, that's a story for another day. We've been live for about an hour and some change. But, I think it's time to call it. What about you?
Yeah, I'd probably say so. Obviously, once we see the second games, the stretch of day 2 of the playoffs on Sunday, we'll obviously have our normal scheduled regular podcast
Yep.
up for Monday. So, yeah, I'd say this is probably a good way to end it.
Yeah, we talked about all the playoff stuff. We enjoyed everybody who came through. Thank you, everyone who came through. First of all, we appreciate all your support, no matter who you are. Thank you for talking in the chat, coming through, whether it's just to listen for like 5 seconds. I saw a couple people pop in and then pop out. It's cool, whatever. It helps us out. But as usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll be back to our normal schedule. We'll have a episode out on Monday around 5:30. The normal spiel in a short. So continue to like and sub. And thank you for all the support. We love you guys, and we'll see you on Monday.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Listen.